Forget everything you think you know about ancient armies, because what Rome built has no comparison with anything that came before or after it. While other peoples gathered warriors, Rome forged human machines of destruction, trained with a brutality and precision that would make even modern armies look on with respect. The Roman legions were not just soldiers marching in formation, they were living, thinking, lethal organisms, capable of building a bridge in the morning, winning a battle in the afternoon, and raising a fortified camp before nightfall. And the most astonishing part? They were doing all of this more than 2,000 years ago, at a time when many peoples were still fighting with primitive weapons. But not all legions were the same. Within this colossal army, there were units that went far beyond the ordinary. Legions whose records of victory were so impressive that their names alone were enough to weaken the enemy's morale before the first blow was struck. Some followed legendary generals to the edge of the known world. Others held impossible frontiers for centuries, and one of them took part in the most decisive moment in Roman history, crossing a river that changed the fate of an entire empire. Today, you will discover the deadliest Roman legions that ever walked the earth, and understand why they still fascinate, intimidate, and inspire the world more than 2 millennia later. And if you enjoy this kind of content, go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of these stories. So settle in, because this story is about to begin. Imagine an army of nearly 6,000 men marching in perfect synchronization, with standardized equipment, a clear hierarchy, and a level of discipline that few modern armies could replicate. That was a Roman legion. It was not a band of wild warriors driven by the adrenaline of battle. It was a meticulously organized war machine, divided into cohorts, centuries, and auxiliary units, each piece fitted together with almost surgical precision. Each century consisted of around 80 soldiers under the command of a centurion, an experienced leader feared even by his own men. The cohorts grouped these centuries into tactical blocks, capable of adapting to almost any terrain or enemy, a structure that compared to today would resemble a multinational corporation more than a simple battalion. Beyond the heavy infantry, there were also the auxiliaries, troops recruited from conquered peoples such as Syrian archers, Hispanic cavalry, and Gallic spearmen, who filled crucial tactical gaps. Military engineers built bridges in record time, erected fortified camps from scratch, and operated siege machines capable of forcing entire cities to surrender without the need for a direct battle. Each legion carried standards and symbols that represented the soul of that unit. Losing the standard in battle was such a grave dishonor that soldiers would die trying to recover it. This powerful sense of identity created a fierce military pride, and it is precisely what explains why certain legions endured for centuries and are still remembered with reverence today. Not every Roman legion made it into history, and that wasn't a matter of luck. What separated an ordinary unit from a legend was a rare combination of factors: extraordinary victories in battles that seemed impossible, loyalty to charismatic generals, and participation in Rome's most decisive moments. Some legions existed for centuries, accumulating a reputation that became by itself a psychological weapon, because their very name could weaken the enemy's morale before the first blow was even struck. This informal ranking of legendary legions was never written in any imperial decree, but it was felt in every camp and every battlefield. When a legendary legion entered the field, even the surrounding Roman soldiers marched with greater confidence, much like dominant sports teams today, when the opponent steps onto the field already believing defeat is inevitable. And it is exactly this symbolic power that makes it worthwhile to explore one by one which legions truly changed the course of ancient history. The Legio X Equestris was not just a military unit, it was essentially an extension of Julius Caesar himself on the battlefield. Created during the Gallic Wars between 58 and 50 BC, this legion was shaped under the direct command of one of the greatest strategists the world has ever seen. Caesar trusted it so deeply that he placed it on the front lines, assigned it the most dangerous missions, and rewarded it generously after each victory, creating a cycle of loyalty and performance that very few commanders have managed to replicate throughout military history. In battle, the Legio X functioned as the tactical backbone of Caesar's army, participating in the conquest of Gaul and following Caesar even through the civil wars against Pompey, moments when the loyalty of a legion was worth more than any strategy. It is no surprise that it became known as Caesar's favorite legion, a title that carried as much weight as any Medal of Honor. And speaking of legions with colossal missions, the next unit we're about to explore had even a more vital responsibility: keeping Rome fed. If the Legio X was Caesar's right arm on the battlefields of Europe, the Legio III Augusta was something even more strategic. It was the guardian of Rome's food supply. Stationed in North Africa for centuries, this legion protected the provinces that supplied the empire with grain, olive oil, and cereals, resources without which Rome would have faced social collapse. It was not a legion of glorious conquest, but one of silent stability, and anyone who understands history knows that holding the rear is just as essential as leading the charge. Fighting rebellious tribes in the African desert and protecting vital trade routes required a legion that was both versatile and extremely resilient. The Legio III Augusta fulfilled this role for so long that it became part of the region's own cultural identity, leaving archaeological traces that historians still study today. It was the kind of unit that rarely appeared in the great battle epics, but if it had failed, it could have brought the empire down from within, through hunger. And speaking of difficult frontiers to control, the next legion faced perhaps the most brutal and unpredictable enemy Rome ever encountered. If there was one frontier that kept Roman generals awake at night, it had a name: Germania. The Legio I Germanica was one of the units assigned to contain tribes that did not follow the rules of conventional warfare, peoples who knew every tree, every swamp, and every possible ambush within that hostile territory. Unlike the open battles of the Mediterranean world, fighting in Germania meant stepping onto a board where the enemy defined the rules, requiring a legion capable of adapting to chaos just as efficiently as it dominated open terrain. The name Arminius still echoes as a painful reminder of what that frontier was capable of doing to Rome. This Germanic leader orchestrated the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, where 3 entire Roman legions were annihilated in a devastating ambush, one of the greatest military disasters in Roman history. The Legio I Germanica operated within this same environment of constant danger, where every march could be the last, a daily test of endurance and courage. And speaking of moments that changed Rome forever, the next legion became famous not because of a single battle, but because of one decision that altered the destiny of an entire empire. There were moments in history when a single decision changes everything, and the Legio XIII Gemina stood at the center of one of the most dramatic moments in Roman history. When Julius Caesar decided to challenge the Senate and ignite a civil war, he crossed the Rubicon River with this legion at his side, in a gesture that was both a declaration of war and a point of no return. The famous phrase, "the die is cast," was born in that very moment, when a general and his soldiers chose loyalty to a man over obedience to an institution. The Legio XIII Gemina was not necessarily the largest of all Roman legions, but it carried something that no battlefield victory could buy: a symbolic weight of being the legion present at a decisive turning point in history. This episode became so legendary that even today the expression "to cross the Rubicon" is used around the world to describe irreversible and courageous decisions, a cultural legacy that has endured for more than 2,000 years. And if a single legion could change history with a march, imagine what the training behind these units was capable of producing. The secret behind any legendary legion was not only in their swords, it was in what happened long before the battlefield, in training grounds where ordinary men were transformed into war machines. The routine of a Roman legionary would make even modern professional athletes reconsider their limits. Daily marches of up to 30 kilometers with full equipment, combat training with weapons intentionally heavier than the real ones, and a level of discipline so strict that any disobedience was punished with exemplary severity. It was not training designed merely to keep soldiers fit, it was designed to make them incapable of feeling fear when it mattered most. Their standard equipment was a masterpiece of tactical engineering. The gladius, a short sword devastating in close combat, the pilum, a heavy spear designed to disable an enemy's shield before engagement, and the scutum, a shield that when combined with those of fellow soldiers formed an almost impenetrable wall. Each piece was designed to work in harmony with the collective formation, because a single legionary was dangerous, but an entire century fighting as one was nearly unstoppable. And it is precisely this scientific and collective mindset that explains why Rome did not just win battles, it revolutionized the very art of war. Rome did not conquer half the world through brute force alone, it conquered through intelligence. Roman military engineering was so advanced that it often left enemies stunned. Legions that, when stopping to camp in hostile territory, could build an entire fortified encampment from scratch, complete with towers, ditches, and walls, in just a matter of hours. Bridges were constructed across wide rivers in record time, and roads cut through mountains and forests with a precision that made both military advance and logistical supply far easier. It was as if Rome carried not only an army, but an entire moving city wherever it went. Roman siege machines, catapults, battering rams, and siege towers forced walled cities to surrender without the need for open battle, saving valuable lives and resources. Every Roman camp functioned as a temporary fortress, making surprise attacks nearly impossible. It wasn't just strength, it was strategy applied with a cold and calculated efficiency that very few peoples of antiquity could match. And all this science became even more visible in the moment when the legions positioned themselves for combat. The primary Roman formation operated in organized and rotating lines. While soldiers in the front line fought and became exhausted, the second line moved forward to replace them without breaking the rhythm of the attack. This system maintained constant pressure on the enemy, who faced soldiers that were always fresh, while their own warriors gradually lost strength trying to break through a human wall that simply never seemed to tire. It was psychologically devastating and completely intentional. When the enemy began to retreat, the cavalry on the flanks moved in to transform that retreat into a massacre, closing the trap and eliminating any chance of regrouping. The Romans also mastered the art of adapting their formations to terrain and to the type of enemy, something most ancient armies could not do with the same speed. It was a strategy that combined strength, intelligence, and coordination at a level the ancient world had rarely seen, and all of it was only possible because of a larger system that explains why Rome dominated the ancient world like almost no other empire in history. Rome did not merely create an army, it created the first truly professional and large-scale army in history, a model that no other ancient empire managed to replicate. Roman discipline was almost supernatural. Soldiers obeyed orders without hesitation, executed complex maneuvers under extreme pressure, and held their formations even when everything around them was collapsing. What truly set Rome apart from others was logistics, the ability to supply, move, and sustain massive armies across hostile territories using roads, supply depots, and organized routes that turned warfare into something resembling an industrial operation. This combination of factors allowed Rome to control a territory stretching from Western Europe to the Middle East, including North Africa, for centuries. And perhaps the most impressive part is that this military model influenced armies for more than 2,000 years, still being studied in modern military academies today. The most deadly Roman legions were not just combat units, they were living symbols of what happens when a civilization elevates warfare to a level of science and professionalism the world had never seen before. Now you understand something that few people stop to consider. Rome did not dominate the ancient world by accident, by luck, or simply because it had more soldiers. It dominated because it created a system, a military model so intelligent and so well structured that it endured for centuries and still influences armies today. Every legion you discovered here carried not only swords and shields, but a mindset of collective excellence that transformed ordinary men into something truly extraordinary. And the question that remains is this: what could you achieve with that same level of discipline and strategy applied to your own life? Which of these legions do you think was the most powerful of all? Caesar's favorite, the Guardian of Africa, or the legion that crossed the Rubicon? Leave your answer in the comments because this discussion is going to be epic. And if you made it this far, you've already proven you're the kind of viewer who will love what's coming next, because the upcoming videos will dive even deeper into the secrets of the Roman Empire. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because the people who arrive first to this knowledge are always one step ahead. Rome was not built in a day, but your knowledge about it can grow every week. See you in the next video.